All right, so our steeping has gone about 10 minutes now, so we can actually kind of taste through these and see what we're experiencing. This is very often the most fun part of the day. Generally, I really try to take a lot of notes for myself so that I remember, I can look back on them and see, if it's a very obscure herb that I'm not familiar with, at least I can kind of take some notes, whether I think it could work in a beer or whether it's kind of like an immediate, no way, this isn't going to work. Sometimes those no ways are as simple as the flavor just isn't as intense enough, and I don't think that this would ever come through in a beer with other things going on. Other times it could just be that it's immensely bitter or immensely tannic, or as simple as the flavor just isn't good. A lot of times, just by looking at it, you can kind of tell how much particulate you're going to need to filter out to get a good sample. Generally, something as simple as running it through can do the job. If it's full of all sorts of strange particulate, lots of fibrous material and anything like that, you can run it through a coffee filter. That's a little bit slower, of course, but works really well. This is a fun one, the Hibiscus, just because it's so insanely colored. Getting it off of the actual adjunct is good, so you don't have things obstructing your taste buds. You can get your nose in there really well. You can really see the color. So obviously, this is almost beer colored, so that's not something that you'd have to worry too much about. But obviously the Hibiscus is pretty remarkable how intense the color can be. I often try to get some friends, family, coworkers involved in these tastes, because everybody draws their sensory from different experiences, and sometimes you get some really, really cool adjectives to describe them. Some things might taste good to you, but maybe not so good to other people, so it's important to know that. As many palates that you can get involved in, the better. So this one was our elderflower. Definitely has a very unique aroma. I wouldn't really call it floral, which is definitely something that I've experienced in the past with this. It does have kind of a floral element, but I'd say a little bit more earthy, and actually kind of reminds me a little bit of the burnt edges of lasagna. So that might not necessarily be good in all beers. Important to know. And then actually putting it in your mouth and experiencing the bitterness can be super critical. It actually tastes more like lasagna than it smells. But it's really not that bitter. Pretty soft bitterness, if any, which is great. That way we can really approach the beer with the tools that we already have at our fingertips through some of the software, through the alpha acids of hops. We can completely control the bitterness and not really worry about the contribution that this could have. This one is the Hibiscus. Definitely smells kind of like cranberry juice to me. Has a floral element, but is almost more berry-like to me in the aroma. You can almost smell that it's probably going to have like a tartness to it. It's really delicious, super flavorful. Obviously, there's a reason why Hibiscus is used in beer fairly regularly. It has a great flavor. It's kind of fruity. It's a little bit tart, but you got to make sure you use that to your advantage. There's really no questioning that Hibiscus is going to be in it. The color's beautiful, really great ingredient. All right, this last sample here, this is the Chamomile. It's got a pretty nice, beautiful, almost honey-like color to it. Should work in pretty much any type of beer based off the color alone. The aroma is really, really pleasant. Kind of hard to put your finger on it. It's kind of one of those things where with so many of these botanicals, it can be hard to find the right words for it because it's basically, a lot of times the nomenclature we have to describe other flavors is stemmed in these botanicals, so they are kind of a baseline. Can be hard to explain. I'd say it's kind of vanilla-like, faintly floral, herbaceous, earthy, but intense enough that it would come through in a beer. A little bit more bitterness in this one than the other three. Kind of like a tannic, woody quality to it. So knowing that, I could either potentially make the base beer a little bit sweeter to counteract that, or I could just be more careful with my steeping time of this. So if I steep it shorter, that should minimize some of the tannic quality or the bitterness quality. Also, if I steep it with cooler water, so if I still want to make sure that I pasteurize it, if that's what I need to do, I can go, in the 170 to 180 range. If I'm not so interested in pasteurizing it, then I could dabble with doing a cold steep for 12 to 18 hours and just seeing what comes out of it. I've used Wormwood as a really great example of something that's really intensely bitter. I've read that it's one of, if not the most bitter compounds that's natural to earth. It can be really, really challenging to use something like that in beer. The interesting part about Wormwood, though, is that it actually has a really beautiful aromatic quality. So if you can kind of master how to add it, then it could be really cool. Could be a really cool part of a beer. So basically, every time I've used it in the past, I have done that cold steep method. Sometimes you don't even really need more than a couple hours to get the flavor and aromatics out of it. In the instance that you are really concerned with pasteurization, but you feel like applying heat to the adjunct is not good for it or not giving you the qualities that you want, it could be as simple as making a cold steep of something and then removing the adjunct and then pasteurizing that liquid after the adjuncts are removed. In that case, you should not be creating more bitterness out of it. And then you can add that pasteurized thing into the beer. So a lot of different methods to do it. Really just depends on what your end goal is, what you're trying to get out of it.